active gaming on one side. Kids line up, they love it. This is with their age to their age. This vehicle is designed to have two purposes. One purpose is during an emergency. It functions as a mobile information and command unit. And then during non-emergencies, we use it to support our chronic disease division. And we use virtual reality and active gaming to combat sedentary lifestyle.
So we heard what this vehicle, the Harris Public Health Building a Healthy Community, what this vehicle is put to use for. Your name?
Gisela Bona.
And who do you work for?
UT School of Dentistry.
How has your institution helped during disasters in Houston, like during Harvey?
During Harvey, the dental van came and helped all the patients that had. They were staying in the greater in this convention center. They were helping them to if they had some dental problems or dental pain, and they were doing some treatment.
Mayor Sylvester Turner, in his different presentations at seminars, workshops in the city, has actually said the contribution of Centerpoint Energy to disasters which have happened recently in the city of Houston, like the Harvey disaster. He said when so much rain was poured in the city and the lighting went out, Centerpoint had become a great partner with the city of Houston leadership in making sure that people got power back to their houses, and employees worked endlessly to make sure that recovery was fast and reliable. So Centerpoint is here in their with staff in their van, and that's just to tell you that they are partners with the city in development and in disaster work. I'm Dr. Thompson Akwo, Ntuba, the Chief of Health and Development Magazine, downtown the convention center in the city of Houston. The American Red Cross is always involved during disasters and emergencies around the United States and the world.
Pencil, and in turn their heart has stopped. You can still do chest compressions at your pace.
If you don't have one of these, that's It's a little hard depending on how submerged you are in the water. But it also, these little hammers have a seatbelt cutter on it. So if for some reason you were in an accident, you could also use it to cut off your seatbelt for easy access to get out. But at the end of the day, we want you to remember to get out of your vehicle. Don't make sure that you don't even get foot in that position. We want to make sure that you remember to where you might be on the road, let it So, Texas. That doesn't mean that our fatalities that we're going to be different.
The Houston Airport Incident Command, the Houston Airport Incident Command truck, the Red Cross Disaster Relief, the Red Cross Disaster Relief. We have the National Weather Service, the Houston Police Department, High Water Rescue.
We've got a lot of information that's being provided by the National Weather Service. One of the things I want to make sure I just reiterate to you, one of the things that we'll put out there would be a watch or a warning. Just make sure you know the difference. A watch is letting you know that the conditions for whatever threat we're talking about are favorable to occur, but that doesn't mean that they're actually occurring right then and there. A warning means that that threat is either imminent or occurring. So the main difference between the two is helping you better understand what your response time needs to be. With a watch, you have time to respond, you have time to prepare. With a warning, you have to actually take action right then and there. Now, one of the other things I want to point out to you is the difference between a flood and a flash flood. So a flood, when we're talking about just a general flood, where you're having water over normally dry land, if it's caused by a river or a bayou, poor drainage, high tides or storm surge, if it's happening in a longer duration, so say you're looking at several days to weeks, that's a generalized flood, so a long-term flood. When we talk about flash flooding, it's different. We're talking about excessive rainfall that's causing rapidly rising water in a short period of time, so less than 6 hours. The main reason we tell you the difference between the two is because of your response time. If you have a generalized flood that happens over several days, you have your resources around, move things from your first floor to your second floor. A flash flood is going to happen extremely quickly, and you have to take the difference between a watch and a warning and a flood and a flash flood. You now understand the 4 products that we issue that are in the 4 panels in the middle. We also issue 2 other products. One is to help us with kind of giving you some lead time. That's the product that's highlighted in green. It's just called a flood advisory. It's just to let you know if you're having nuisance problems in an area, but it's not necessarily life-threatening. And then we also have an escalation of a flash flood warning, and that's called a flash flood emergency. We've only issued 4 different flash flood emergency events within the past several years in this area. And one of those was Harvey, of course. And then a couple of the other ones were Tax Day, Memorial Day, and then of course the Brenham floods. So you can see those were on an escalated scale than a typical flash flood warning, but every warning is life-threatening. Don't take that for granted, okay? Keep that in mind, that every warning is posing a danger to you, your family, and your property. Now, before I wrap up, the biggest thing I want to make sure is you know where to get all of this information, because I can tell you, all this great information, we can put out the best forecast in the mornings, but if you don't know how to get it or don't have a way to get it, it means diddly squat. So where can you get warnings? You can get warnings on your cell phone from the wireless emergency alerts. However, those are only going to alert your phone for a tornado warning or a flash flood warning. So where would you get your other flood warnings? So river flood warnings, bayou flood warnings, aerial flood warnings, flood advisories. Where do you get that information? You can get that information on social media, on Facebook and Twitter. We automatically tweet out every single product that we put out. So if you follow our news feed, you can get all those products as soon as we're pushing the button to send them out. You can get it through NOAA Weather Radio. I know a lot of people may have them or may not have them, but it is a great resource to have. And then also you can get the information from our broadcasters on TV and on the radio. And if worse comes to worse and you want to make sure that you're getting the most accurate information, you can always go to our website and you can search out that information for yourself. Either way, whatever you decide, however you get your warnings, make sure that you have multiple ways to get your warnings. If you rely on your cell phone and your cell phone dies, how are you going to get the warnings after? If you lose power and you can't charge your cell phone, how are you going to get your information? If you lose satellite service, how are you going to get your information? Keep those things in mind. The other thing I want to point out to you guys is our advanced hydrologic prediction system. So this is where you can get all of those river forecasts that I was telling you about, okay? I'm sure a lot of you people have seen, the hydrographs, especially in recent flooding events. This is where you can go in, zoom into the gauge that's nearest you and figure out what the forecast is going to be. And we also have noted impacts based off of past floods to kind of help you better understand what the certain river elevations, what those impacts might be causing in your local area. If you have any questions regarding these forecasts, I'll be happy to answer them afterwards, or down the road, you can always contact us with our webmaster link at the bottom of each hydrograph page. And the last thing is, for all of our forecast points, they're tied to USGS gauges. You can actually set a water alert. So if you want to know when the river gets to a certain elevation, if there's a USGS gauge, you can actually go and sign up for real-time alerts. You would just subscribe, and it would allow you to set them up as either a text message or an email. It would allow you to set up if you want it hourly or daily. If you want to get certain type of stage data just at different intervals, you can customize it to whatever you want to see. So this would give you real-time alerts on your cell phone or your email to let you know when you need to be paying attention to these river elevations and flooding impacts. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff, and he's going to kind of transition for a more localized talking points on flooding in your area.
All right. I got it up? Okay. So we're going to talk about hydrology in Harris County, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our flood warning system, so you can all go out and look at some of this information that we look at when we're having flooding on your own. So one of the important things to know is what watershed you live in. So we're very fortunate here in Harris County that we don't have any big river systems coming to us. Like, for example, the flooding you're seeing right now in Arkansas and along the Mississippi River, where it rains far away, and 2 or 3 weeks later you start having flooding in your location. Now, if you do live in Fort Bend County or Waller County or Brazoria County, you do have to deal with that with the Brazos River, with the Trinity River to our east. It can rain upstream of you, and that water can come down and impact you at a different time. But in Harris County, for the most part, our flooding comes from what falls directly on top of us. We don't get a lot of water from the other parts of the state, and this is why. This is our drainage area, so we extend up to about the Huntsville area to the north, a little bit of Waller County, a little bit of Fort Bend County, a little bit of Liberty County. But for the most part, we're very confined in a very small drainage area that comes into Harris County. And the San Jacinto River watershed is broken down into the 22 watersheds that make up Harris County. So we have 22 different bayous and creeks that flow across Harris County. And for the most part in Harris County, all of the water flows from west to east. So from the western part of the county over to the eastern part of the county, and it all eventually ends up in Galveston Bay or the Houston Ship Channel. And so the water doesn't necessarily flow from north